Done an enormous analysis of management research across a whole range of studies and done a meta-analysis. And we've identified 7 core capabilities or traits or competencies or whatever word you want to use for them to explain what seems to make most difference to a manager. And some people say, which one matters most? And the answer is very easy. It's the first one. So this matters more than all the rest. And it's the ability to form strong relationships. Know how to repair them, nourish them, and change them, adapt them, and so forth. There's a thing called the LMX. It sounds a bit like a bicycle, I know. But it's about the leader-member exchange. It's a psychological term that defines the strength of the relationship between the boss and the person being managed. And what they've found very clearly is that where there's a strong LMX, this has a disproportionate impact, upward, like a magnifier, on everything else that the manager does. So for example, when a manager tries to influence by saying, you're fantastic at this, I'd love you to go and do it, it really plays to your strengths, or we need to do this because that's what the rules are around here, that's what the bosses have said. If they've got a strong LMX, the person goes, brilliant, I'm up for that. But if they've got a weak LMX, they go, oh, they're just trying to butter me up, it's a load of nonsense. The same thing happens with feedback. When feedback's given with a strong LMX, the individual embraces it, thinks it's a rich source of learning, and goes on and acts on that feedback. But where the LMX is weak, this relationship between manager and the person being managed, they just ignore it and actually have less respect for the manager as a result. So if we've got this LMX piece right, this relationship between the boss and the person being managed, and the good managers realize that that's a relationship that's built and nourished in 100 interactions every day. I mean, a bit like thinking about our partner and saying all that matters is the anniversary. It's just like saying all that matters is the annual performance review. The relationships we have at home are ones that nurture every phone call, every email, the things we do, the pattern of our behavior defines the strength of our relationships at home. And in much the same way at work too. So there's a key part of this, which is the relationship between the manager and the person being managed and how to make that strong. And this has a magnifier or a reducer on everything else that we cover. Obviously, relationships are not just about one-to-one, they're also about one-to-team. And there's a big here about building pride. And those managers that are able to set goals, set milestones, and celebrate them, and the mini milestones on the way, and feel a sense of collection. And if you've ever had a great teacher or a great manager, you've probably noticed how they build a sense of pride amongst the group, that we're all in this together. There may be a common enemy outside, maybe a department to beat or a competitor or something like that, but we're all in this together. And actually, we can only achieve the goal if we all contribute. We each have a role to play, but without one of us, the whole thing doesn't happen so well. And Michael West will talk a bit more about this, the factors that make up a high-performing team. And the third bit of relate is about relationships with the rest of the organization, providing the air cover, getting people off our backs, and using my networks in order to bring people together. The really interesting research on people who move organizations, they look at analyst teams in investment banks, and they found those analyst teams, the whole team was moved from, say, JP Morgan to, say, Goldman Sachs. They underperformed in the new organization versus how they had in the previous one. Now you think because it was the whole team and it was the same set of clients and the same work, they perform at least as well, potentially better. They've been paid a lot more to move there. But actually the cultural environment, the networks they had, the social support is so significant that it actually led to a fall off in their performance. So again, there's some really important stuff about relate. And this we could talk about forever, and won't today, but this is the one that matters. And if nothing else gets addressed in the managers, this is the one that most counts. But this is also the one that's most about the psychology of behaviors, boundaries, redefining, getting hooked in transactional analysis games, what happens when people, the no-but game and the I can do better than this game, and so on and so forth. So this is where that manager needs those skills to redefine those relationships when they get tricky. The next piece is about energize. A lot of research was done by Gallup on the impact of leadership programs, and they found that those that were most effective were the ones that got leaders to give hope to their people, to raise energy, and instead of, when you come back from the weekend and someone says, how was your weekend? What do people tend to say? It's okay, it's fine, it's all right, nice. And those that actually give rather more substance to their answers. It was terrible, I went to this film, it was rubbish, or it was fantastic, I went to the beach, we had such fun, or whatever it was, but give more color, give more energy, give more in exuding their energy, and then infect those around them. And therefore, this ability to energize others, simply that sense of spirit and momentum is incredibly important. The third one is direct. This sometimes gets lost, or sometimes gets overplayed. But it's about giving the context and being, to a degree, having a sense of authority about where we're going, what needs to be done, and when. There are times for consultation and for collaboration, and there are times for decisions. And the manager is the manager, not the best friend, not the ally, not the forever listener, the mum or dad, the counselor. They are the manager, and the manager needs to set direction, give it, and guide people along those paths. The fourth one is thrive. We hosted a dinner earlier this week for a whole range of CEOs, many from your organizations, and thank you for those who helped bring them along. And Paul Walsh, who's the CEO of Diageo, who in the last 10 years, the stock market has gone down 10%, and the Diageo stock price has doubled, which is quite a result, which is no surprise why he's one of the longest serving CEOs in the FTSE 100. He's been there for over 10 years, which is, I think, like Martin Sorrell and one other have been any longer. So he's really been there for a long time. He's delivered the results. He knows what works. And he's invested enormously in leadership. He says he's invested £20 million in cash in a leadership program just to raise the standard of leadership across his organization because he sees it as so important. And one of the things he kept coming back to was leaders looking after themselves. Because actually, if they don't look after themselves, then that's going to affect everyone else around them. So a leader who thrives not only becomes resilient, not only finds ways of renewing their own resources, but looks at how they can grow. What are their strengths and how can they guide the work so they're playing to their strengths, and so they're doing different work in a year's time from what they're doing today, rather than carrying on and trying to maintain and control and be swamped and exhausted and tired and worn down by it all. So this ability to thrive, to look after myself, is incredibly important. The next one is coach. Again, we've all heard lots about coaching in our lives. We've come up with a model called commercial coaching, which we'll talk a bit more about in O2 case study, which is about a much more future-focused approach to coaching and a much more commercial model where we're being not just asking questions, but at times being quite directive as well. Moving on, innovate, the ability to think things differently. Again, a big theme that came out in this debate, and we had the CEO of TalkTalk and O2 and the MD of Accenture and leading folk from Kraft and so forth, what we're talking about is how the world is moving so much faster that actually what you need is managers who can think through the answer themselves and make good judgment calls, who can find out how different way of looking at the problem. So they see what everyone else sees, but think what no one else has thought. And that ability to change that, to think differently, to come up with fresh ideas, is at the heart of being an effective manager, which is hence those questions about have they changed the way that things work, rather than just doing the job, changing the way it's done to make it more effective. And the final one is about execute. I just come back from a fascinating fact-finding mission in India. And I was in Mumbai and Hyderabad, and I met a series of CEOs from some of the biggest and most successful companies there. And I also went rag picking with the people in the slums and just saw India from a whole range of different angles, a whole range of different management styles. And what does it take to manage rag picking? They take the garbage out and they get it. It's their version of recycling. And they get paid 2 rupees a bag of recycled rubbish in 42-degree heat. And yet at the same time, I met a wonderful guy called Louis Miranda, who runs IDFC Capital. He's run several banks. He's described by the Wall Street Journal as having built more power stations than the Indian government. He's done an amazing job there of transforming how the energy sector works across India and built great businesses as a result. And I asked him what was the one skill he most wanted to see increased in his managers. And he said it's the ability to execute, the ability to complete and make stuff happen. And I have to say, when Paul Walsh was talking, he also talked about the ability to execute. He said, I have lots of managers who are too busy innovating and talking and coming up with complex models and ways of doing things, are not enough who get on and make it happen. So this ability to complete, to get stuff, to get the results, is a vital 7th talent of the manager. So we thought that was a useful way of thinking about managers, not the 100 competencies, but the 7, and the 7 that consistently show a greater delta in management performance. I'm going to just share with you briefly a research with 38 organizations, again listed in one of the footnotes in the paper, about where was the biggest difference. And actually, direct and execute were seen as the smaller gaps, and relate was the biggest one. So this most important of these management characteristics is seen by these 38 organizations, by HR people in these 38 organizations, as the biggest gap, the one that most needs addressing. So what can we do about it? And I think there's a few thoughts on the organizational side, then I'm going to talk a little bit about management development, because I've been slightly rude about it, and I want to explain how I think we can solve this problem. The first thing is, organizationally, we can turn up the noise around promoting people who are good at this. And when we do make a noise about that's why they were promoted, and we can, at the bottom point here, we can start to appraise managers against a whole range of metrics, like retention or absenteeism, as well as employee survey results and other things around human performance. And in particular, we can focus more on these second and third line managers and how do they manage the people management bit of their direct reports rather than the task management bit or the output management bit. But I also want to talk a bit about development. And I think this is where we can all collectively do something very radical that would both save us money and greatly increase the impact and our ability to grow managers quickly. And there are some principles here. The first is that we learn more when we learn little and often. Psychologists call this distributed learning. And we think about how you learn to drive a car, how you learn to play the piano or anything like that. It's a bit at a time. Also, we try something, we give it a go, and then we come back and reflect. How did it go? Did it work? Did it not? What can I learn differently? And what about others like me who've been through something similar? How can I learn from them? We therefore learn with our peers, and we need to pitch a bit higher. We talk at Mind Gym about pitching to the top quartile of any group, and everyone else has to stretch to kind of get there. Whereas there's sometimes an orthodoxy in the learning world that we have to go at the pace of the slowest learner. And that means a lot of people feel it's a bit basic for them, a bit dull. People come back and say, I could have done that in 2 hours, took a whole day. And that's because we're pitching things a little low. So we need to raise our altitude on this. And I want to show you an example of a program we've run, which is an altruistic program run by the Mind Gym called Parent Gym. And one of the challenges that that exists in society is the fact that parents, the quality of parenting has a greater impact on school grades and life chances and emotional security than anything else. It's better than school buildings or head teachers or curriculum or any of that sort of stuff. It's the quality of parenting. But very little is done to improve parenting, especially in the socially deprived, harder to reach groups of our society. So we set up a 9-week program run in some of the poorest parts of London and Belfast on parenting. And each week, people have a magazine. The thing on the right is a copy of the magazine. It looks a bit like OK Magazine. Different themes, love, health, friends and family. And you go to the magazine. It's like a workout for those who've been to a Mind Gym workout. It's very participative. You're filling in stuff. You're talking to each other. You're doing exercises. And at the end, you agree on a mission, which you and I might call homework, but they're called missions, on something I'm going to try and do between now and next week. It might be have a treasure hunt. It might be try the naughty step. It might be make a pizza together. It might be do a scrapbook. It might be spend one-to-one time with one of my children. Any of these things. I'm going to try it out and see what happens. Next week, I come back and I score on myself on a scale of 1 to 10 about how much effort I put into that particular mission. And if I scored 7 or higher, I tell the story about what happened. It may have been a disaster. We tried the treasure hunt. I had the clues around the park. It rained. Everyone cried. It was a disaster. Went home. But someone else may say, well, I tried the treasure hunt. It also rained. But then I knocked on some neighbours' doors and said, could I use their flats as sources for the treasure hunt as well? And they said, yeah, OK, that sounds like fun, but can my child take part too? And we had this big... And the stories start to get shared. And this is what we mean by the peer learning, that we learn far more from each other often than we do from the experts. But the real lesson for today that we've learned from this is the power of distributed learning. So the model that we've approached, and we've developed a Mind Gym Masterclass, which is an open program, the only open program we run on management skills. And it's designed like this. We also do versions of this in a range of organizations. And I want to tell you why it's designed like this and why this is a model that can help you, whatever you're doing, make it more effective. We start off with a diagnostic, some baseline measure, some sense of where along those 7 traits do I score most strongly, which are the strengths to build from, and which of those I might want to develop. We then run some session. Our story, we basically run 90-minute workouts, but this could be a half day or whatever, on one of the topics. We think it's good to start with relate, because it's such an important one and it magnifies everything else, but it could be any topic that you like. Then at the end of that, we agree a mission, or an action challenge, or a task, or a bit of homework, something we're going to go and try and do back in the office or the factory or the sewage plant where I was yesterday. And then when I come back a week later or 2 weeks later, or maybe it's a month later, I do a thing called a booster. And in the booster, we discuss what happened, how well it worked. It only takes 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, what I can learn from that and what I could do differently. Then, when we come back from the booster, we go to the next subject, in this case, thrive. We learn something, we take an action challenge, and we come back a week or 2 later and do that. And so we continue learning on a regular basis, learning something, trying it out, and coming back and reflecting. So our management development isn't a one-off event in some fancy hotel in glorious place, or even with lovely views all over London, but it's something that takes place at work. It's something that takes place in 2-hour bursts, once a week, once a fortnight, once a month. And I'm always learning, and I'm always trying, and I'm always coming with peers to review. And then the second and third line managers are at the top getting involved in doing that. And that's the basic model for what O2 did. So if you're interested in that, you can hear a lot more about how that worked at the case study this afternoon.